Chapter 1: The Sands Before the Storm, beneath the endless glare of Tatooine's twin suns. The desert stretched without mercy. The horizon was a shimmering mirage, the heat thick enough to feel on the skin like a living thing. Out here, the wind carried more than sand. It carried the whispers of lives spent in bondage, of dreams crushed beneath the weight of masters and debts. It was here, in this forsaken stretch of the galaxy, that a boy named Anakin Skywalker first opened his eyes to a universe that seemed intent on keeping them shut. He was born a slave, though born was too simple a word for his arrival. No father claimed him, no lineage could be traced. His mother Shmi spoke of a miracle, but in hushed tones. For miracles drew suspicion in Mos Espa. The boy's existence was an enigma, a question that no one dared to ask too loudly. And yet, even before he could speak, the Force coiled around him like an unseen current, whispering promises and warnings in a language he could not yet understand. At 9 years old, Anakin had the quick hands and quicker mind of someone who had learned survival as a necessity, not a choice. He could fix anything: pad racers, vaporators, junk droids, whose owners had long given up hope. Watto, the Toydarian, who owned both him and his mother, saw in him nothing more than a useful tool, a means to repair machines that brought in profit. But in truth, the boy was more than a mechanic. He was a creator. Scraps in his hands became wonders. The battered protocol droid in the corner, the one missing a torso plate, was a gift for his mother. The podracer, hidden in the back room, was a secret gift for himself, though calling it his was a dangerous kind of thinking for a slave. When Anakin spoke of the stars, his eyes would light in ways the suns could not dim. He dreamed of piloting ships, of seeing worlds where the sand didn't choke the air and the horizon wasn't a cage. But even a child's dreams had limits in Mos Espa. The chains weren't just the transmitter embedded in his flesh. They were the quiet reminders from his mother's voice. Be mindful, Arnie. Hope is precious, but it can cut as deep as it heals. The days bled into each other, broken only by the excitement of pad races. Here the boy felt something he couldn't name, a rush, a connection to the machine beneath him and to the track ahead. Every turn, every burst of speed, every narrow escape from disaster felt natural, like breathing, like destiny. The Force, though he did not yet know to call it that, guided his hands and his instincts. It was during one such day, the suns hanging low in the sky, that fate arrived disguised as chance. Two travelers stepped into Watto's shop, a tall man robed in Jedi colors, and a young woman dressed like no desert dweller. The man's name was Qui-Gon Jinn. His presence was calm, yet carried a weight that even a child could feel. The woman, Padme, smiled in a way that made Anakin forget the heat and the dust for a moment. In their questions, in the way Qui-Gon's eyes lingered on him, there was something unfamiliar. Not pity, not ownership, but interest. Later, as the three spoke away from Watto's ears, Anakin found himself telling them what he had never told a stranger, that he was building his own pad racer, that he had dreams bigger than this desert, and hesitantly, that he had never known a father. Qui-Gon listened, and though his face was unreadable, the boy felt as if he had been weighed and measured in that gaze. The race that followed would be remembered in whispers for years. Anakin's pad racer roared to life, every part of it tuned by his own hands. He flew through the course with a mix of daring and precision that defied reason for someone so young. When the dust settled, the crowd roared, the huts cursed, and Watto stared in disbelief. But to Anakin, The victory was more than just a win. It was the sound of a lock turning. The first crack in the walls of his life. Qui-Gon Jinn had made a wager, one that freed Anakin from Watto's grasp. The boy's heart surged at the thought of leaving, of stepping onto a ship and never looking back. But freedom came with its own cruelty. His mother could not come with him. The transmitter in her body, the weight of Watto's debts, these chains remained. In the dusty twilight of Mos Espa, the boy clung to her one last time. Shmi's hand cupped his cheek, her voice steady despite the ache in it. "Don't look back, Arnie. Your path is forward." The boy nodded, but inside, the seed of something darker took root. The galaxy had taken much from him already. His childhood, his freedom to choose, and now his mother. He swore, silently, that he would return for her, not as a boy, not as a slave, but as someone powerful enough that no one could take anything from him again. As the ship lifted from Tatooine's surface, Anakin pressed his hand to the glass and watched the desert shrink away. The suns burned in the distance, twin eyes that seemed to follow him into the stars. Somewhere deep in the currents of the Force, a shadow stirred, unseen and patient. The boy thought he had escaped his chains, but destiny had merely changed their shape, and far beyond Tatooine, in the chambers of Coruscant, a man cloaked in velvet darkness felt the first ripple of the storm he had been waiting for. The pieces were moving. The boy was in play. Chapter 2. The False Dawn. The stars beyond Tatooine had never seemed so endless. Anakin Skywalker, still small enough for his feet to dangle above the ship's floor, sat pressed against the viewport of the Nubian starship. He drank in every flicker of light, every shifting glow of hyperspace, as though they were promises. Promises of a life where sandstorms no longer stung his skin and chains no longer bit into his flesh. The air aboard the ship was cooler, cleaner than the desert, and it smelled faintly of polished metal and oils. It smelled like freedom, but freedom, as he would soon learn, could be an illusion. Qui-Gon Jinn's quiet presence filled the cabin. He was a man who carried patience like armor, moving with a certainty that made Anakin believe no danger could touch them while the Jedi was near. The boy clung to that belief, the way a drowning man clings to driftwood. Padme spoke to him with kindness, asking about his padrasa, about his life on Tatooine. He told her the truth, at least. The truth as a slave could tell it without letting his voice break. Yet, as the ship cut through hyperspace toward Coruscant, a shadow already lengthened in his story. Qui-Gon spoke to Obi-Wan Kenobi in low tones, words the boy wasn't meant to hear. "He is the chosen one. You must see it, Obi-Wan. The Force is unusually strong with him." The younger Jedi's voice was skeptical. "Master, the Council will decide. But the boy is dangerous. You can feel it." Anakin didn't understand the words entirely, but he felt the shift in their tone. Dangerous. It was a word Watto had used when Anakin pushed too far, when his temper sparked. It was the word that made people step back, eyes narrowed. Now the Jedi said it too. Coruscant was unlike anything Anakin had ever imagined, a planet covered in endless city, towers scraping the sky, air traffic flowing in streams of light. He had never seen so many people, so much movement, so much power concentrated in one place. The Jedi Temple itself loomed high, its spires catching the sunlight like a crown. Here, he thought, was where his life would change forever. The council chamber was a ring of solemn faces. Masters whose names were legend, Yoda, Mace Windu, Ki-Adi-Mundi, all turned their gaze upon him. Their eyes were sharp, weighing him the way Qui-Gon had, but without warmth. They asked questions. He answered them as best he could, though the words often caught in his throat. Then they tested him. Strange visions on a screen, symbols that shifted too fast for the mind to catch. Objects lifted into the air without being touched. The boy did well. He could feel the Force guiding his answers. But still, the murmurs among the masters were doubtful. Yoda's voice was calm, but his words were not. The chosen one, the boy may be, but grave danger, I fear, in his training. Qui-Gon's jaw tightened. The council did not approve training for one so old, they said. The bond to his mother, his fear of loss, these were paths to darkness. Anakin stood in the center of the chamber, his small hands clenched, and felt the first sting of rejection. The days that followed blurred together. Qui-Gon continued to press the council. Anakin shadowed Padme when allowed, fascinated by her poise and by the hidden strength in her voice when she spoke of her people. He was drawn to her in a way he didn't yet understand. Part admiration, part longing for the comfort she seemed to carry effortlessly. Then came Naboo. War had a way of rushing decisions. The Jedi returned to the planet under siege, and Anakin was swept along in events he could barely comprehend. He had been told to stay in the cockpit, to keep out of danger. But danger had always been his companion, and sitting idle was never in his nature. In the chaos of the space battle above Naboo, Anakin's hands moved without thought, guided by something greater. He piloted the fighter into the heart of the Trade Federation's control ship, destroying it in an explosion that rippled across the fleet. To the pilots around him, it was a miracle. To Anakin, it felt inevitable, like the universe itself had opened a path, and all he had to do was walk it, but victory came at a cost. On the palace steps, under the cool Naboo sky, Qui-Gon Jinn lay dying. The Sith had returned, a warrior cloaked in black, wielding a double-bladed lightsaber. Obi-Wan had struck him down, but not before the Sith's blade found Qui-Gon's heart. Anakin knelt beside the Jedi Master who had freed him. Qui-Gon's voice was faint, his breath shallow. Anakin, he is the chosen one. He will bring balance. Train him. The boy gripped his hand, refusing to let go, but already the life was leaving. The loss was like a fissure opening inside him, deep, cold, and hungry. Obi-Wan kept his promise. Anakin was accepted into the Jedi Order, his training to begin, under the man who had doubted him from the start. On the surface, it was a triumph, a slave boy risen to the rank of Padawan. But beneath, the truth was harder. His new life was not freedom, but another kind of servitude. The temple had rules that bound him as tightly as any chain, and masters who watched his every step with wary eyes. They taught him discipline, meditation, control. But the force that surged through him was wild, restless. He was told to let go of his attachments, but how could he let go of his mother? How could he let go of the promise he had made to return for her? The dawn of his Jedi life was bright in appearance, yet false in its nature. The chains had changed, but they had not broken. In the quiet hours of the temple, Anakin Skywalker began to understand that he was not truly free, and somewhere in the shadows of Coruscant, a man named Palpatine smiled, for he too could see the cracks forming in the boy's cage. Chapter 3. The gathering shadows. Years passed within the towering spires of the Jedi Temple, yet Anakin Skywalker never felt at home. The polished floors, the echoing halls, the meditative stillness, they were meant to be a sanctuary, but to him they often felt like a gilded prison. The boy from Tatooine had grown taller, stronger, his features sharpening into those of a young man. He had mastered the forms of the lightsaber, the disciplines of the Force, but beneath the surface, restlessness burned like a hidden ember. The galaxy seemed at peace. The Republic's Senate debated endlessly, laws and policies flowing like a sluggish river. Trade routes bustled, planets thrived, and the Jedi were honored as protectors. But not all was as it seemed. Far from the glittering core worlds, darkness spread in secret. Conflicts flared on the edges of known space, small enough to be ignored but deliberate enough to feed a growing instability. And in the heart of Coruscant, a man named Palpatine sat in the Chancellor's office, watching. The Sith had returned. Though the Jedi believed they had destroyed the threat with the death of Darth Maul, they could not imagine that the true master still walked free, cloaked in the skin of a politician, his every gesture calculated to appear benign. Darth Sidious had patience older than the Republic itself, and his eyes were on one prize above all, Anakin Skywalker. Anakin's reputation within the Order grew quickly. He was bold where others were cautious, decisive where others hesitated. Some masters admired his skill, others whispered that his confidence bordered on arrogance. He saved lives, won battles in simulations, and yet he disobeyed when he thought it necessary. Obi-Wan Kenobi, his master, often walked the line between pride and exasperation. One evening, after a particularly heated training session in which Anakin had bested a seasoned knight using an unorthodox move, Obi-Wan confronted him. "You're reckless," he said, pacing the sparring room. Anakin wiped the sweat from his brow, but did not lower his gaze. "I'm effective. Effectiveness isn't the Jedi way," Obi-Wan countered. "Maybe the Jedi way is too slow." Anakin shot back. It was not the first time such an argument had passed between them, nor would it be the last. But these moments did not pass unnoticed. Sidious had ways of hearing what was spoken in private, and what was left unsaid. The Chancellor began inviting Anakin to private meetings under the guise of mentorship. He would speak softly, weaving praise into his counsel. "You are unlike any Jedi I have ever known," Palpatine would say, his eyes warm but calculating. "Your power is extraordinary, and the galaxy will need extraordinary people in the years ahead." Anakin, who often felt restrained by the Order, drank in those words like a man in the desert finding water. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, small wars flared, disputes between systems, raids by mysterious forces. The Jedi found themselves pulled into matters once left to local governments, and each crisis seemed to bring more power into Palpatine's hands. It was subtle, so subtle that even the most vigilant masters could not see the full pattern. In his private quarters, Anakin's dreams began to change. At first, they were fragments, a voice calling his name from far away, a shadow stretching across the stars. But then the visions became sharper, more vivid. He would wake in the dead of night, heart pounding, certain that the future was trying to speak to him. The dreams were not always of war. Sometimes they were of loss. Faces. He loved fading into nothingness, slipping beyond his reach. Padma Amidala had returned to Coruscant as a senator. Their paths crossed often, and with each meeting, the boyish awe he had once felt deepened into something far more dangerous for a Jedi. They spoke in stolen moments, her voice soft in the quiet of empty corridors. He admired her courage, the way she faced entire assemblies with the same steadiness she had shown years ago on Naboo. And though neither dared to name it, the bond between them grew. The cracks in Anakin's faith widened. The council often kept him at arm's length, granting him missions but rarely their trust. They valued his skill but doubted his judgment. When he questioned their orders, they reminded him of the code. When he pushed for swifter action, they urged patience. Patience, the word felt like a chain to him. One night, after a mission in which his defiance had saved lives but disobeyed orders, Obi-Wan confronted him again. "Anakin, one day your need to act will be your undoing, or it will save the people you hesitate to help," Anakin replied sharply. They stood in silence, the weight of their differences heavy between them. And somewhere far beneath the city, in chambers the Jedi had never seen, Darth Sidious smiled in the dim light. He could feel it. The bond between Anakin and the Jedi was weakening. The boy's trust was fraying, his hunger for recognition growing. All that remained was to push, gently, until the rift became a chasm. The galaxy still called it peace, but it was the peace of an untouched fuse before the fire. The shadows were gathering in the Senate halls, in the outer systems, and most dangerously, in the heart of the Chosen One himself. Anakin could not yet see the storm's shape, but he could feel its pressure, and deep inside, some part of him welcomed it. Chapter 4: War Without End. The galaxy did not fall into war all at once. It began like a storm on the horizon, distant, faint, easy for the complacent to dismiss. Whispers of separatist movements, trade disputes escalating into blockades, assassinations of politicians in far-off systems. But beneath the surface, a hand guided it all, weaving chaos into a tapestry too vast for anyone to see in full. When the war finally ignited, it did so with the force of a supernova. The confederacy of independent systems rose under Count Dooku's banner, a coalition of disillusioned worlds and greedy powers, backed by a war machine of droids without number. The Republic answered not with diplomacy, but with an army of clone soldiers bred for combat. And at the head of those armies, the Jedi found themselves transformed from keepers of peace into generals. Anakin Skywalker was ready for war. If the Jedi Council had ever doubted his abilities, the battlefield erased all question. His reflexes were unmatched, his courage infectious. Where others hesitated, he struck. Where others calculated, he acted. The troops followed him with unwavering loyalty, calling him General Skywalker with pride. His first campaigns were swift victories: Sabacos, Christopes, Felucia. In the chaos of battle, Anakin was in his element. The Force surged through him like a living current, guiding his blade, his aim, his every instinct. He fought not as a measured Jedi, but as a force of nature, cutting through droid legions with a ferocity that both inspired and unsettled his allies. But with each triumph, something else grew within him. War was intoxicating. The rush of command, the thrill of victory, the power to decide the fate of thousands. It was unlike anything the Temple had taught him. The Code urged serenity. War demanded dominance. And Anakin, the boy who had once been powerless, found it impossible to let go of that control once he had tasted it. Obi-Wan fought beside him in many battles, the two moving as if bound by invisible threads. Yet even in the camaraderie of war, their differences deepened. Anakin's impatience clashed with Obi-Wan's caution, his impulsive strikes often saving lives. But at costs Obi-Wan feared he did not yet understand. In the war councils, Chancellor Palpatine often called upon Anakin for his opinion, praising his decisive mind. "The Jedi are wise, Anakin, but they are slow," Palpatine would say in private. "The galaxy needs leaders who can act when others debate." The words fed the hunger Anakin didn't admit to anyone, the hunger to lead, not just as a soldier, but as a shaper of the galaxy's fate. The war dragged on. Planets burned, fleets shattered, whole cities fell to ruin. And still, neither side gained the decisive upper hand. What Anakin did not know, what no Jedi knew, was that the war was never meant to end quickly. It was not a conflict to be won, but a crucible. Every battle, every loss, every hard choice was another hammer blow shaping him into the perfect apprentice Sidious envisioned. The toll was not only in lives lost, but in what it took from Anakin's spirit, the bright boy who had dreamed of the stars now moved through war's wreckage with a grim purpose. He had seen too many soldiers die in his name, too many civilians caught between enemy lines. Each failure to save them deepened the guilt, and with it, the belief that if he had more power, if he had less restraint, he could prevent such losses. Padme's presence became both a comfort and a danger. Their secret marriage, hidden from the Jedi, was the one part of his life he refused to surrender. Letters from her arrived between campaigns, her words a lifeline to a world beyond battle. But each time he returned to Coruscant, the separation became harder to bear. The war stretched them thin, and Anakin's fear of losing her grew with every deployment. One night, after a particularly brutal siege on Cato Neimoidia, Anakin stood in the silent hangar, staring at the ship's scorched hull. Obi-Wan approached, his voice heavy with unspoken concern. "You're pushing yourself too hard." "The war doesn't wait for rest," Anakin replied. "Nor does it end when you burn yourself out," Obi-Wan countered. Anakin looked away. "If I don't act, people die. That's not something I can accept." Neither spoke of how the war had already taken something from both of them, their innocence, their trust in the old ways. Across the galaxy, in the darkened chambers of his private office, Palpatine received the latest reports. Each one spoke of Anakin's victories, his daring, his growing influence. The Chancellor's lips curved into the faintest smile. The war was doing exactly what it was meant to, making Anakin indispensable, feared, and above all, accustomed to power. But the longer the war stretched on, the more it blurred the lines between necessity and choice. Anakin began to make decisions the Council would have questioned, striking preemptively, pushing for offensives that sacrificed strategic patience for swift resolution. His soldiers loved him for it. The Jedi warned him against it, and in the quiet spaces between battles, the whispers of the Force around him shifted. What once felt like guidance now felt like temptation, urging him toward the quicker path, the stronger hand, the action that would end a fight before it began. The Clone Wars would last years. For the galaxy, they were an age of blood and fire. For Anakin Skywalker, they were the forge that would temper him into something new and far more dangerous. By the time the war neared its end, the boy who had once dreamed under Tatooine's suns was gone. In his place stood a man who had learned to wield power like a blade, and was not ready to put it down. Chapter 5. The Price of Visions. The war had taken much from Anakin Skywalker, comrades. Innocence, the illusion of control, but what it gave him in return was far more dangerous, the belief that only his will could bend the galaxy away from ruin. In the third year of the Clone Wars, that belief hardened into something unbreakable, and it was then that the dreams began. At first they came like faint ripples in the Force, shadows on the edge of waking, a voice calling from far away, a silhouette bathed in light, and then darkness. But as the nights passed, the images sharpened. He saw her face, her skin pale, her breath shallow, her hands slipping from his grasp as life bled away. He woke each time with a shout drenched in sweat. The image burned into his mind like a scar. The first time it happened, he tried to dismiss it. The second time, he could not. By the third, he knew. They were not dreams, they were visions. He had seen this before, years ago, when his mother's death had haunted his sleep until it became reality. The Force had warned him then, and he had failed. Her. He would not fail again. He began watching her more closely, studying her movements, the tone of her voice, the way her hand lingered at her side. Every small sign became proof of what he feared. Padme, heavy now with the life they had created, together spoke often of the future, of raising their child in peace. Anakin forced himself to smile and agree, but inside, the storm gathered strength. When he confided in Obi-Wan, the Jedi's answer was calm, measured, infuriating. Dreams pass in time, Anakin. Let them go, let them go. That was always the answer. Let go of your fear. Let go of your attachments. Let go of the people you love. The Jedi way might as well have told him to stop breathing, but the dreams did not fade. They grew sharper, crueler, showing him moments he could not bear: Padme's cries, his own helplessness, the stillness of her form when it was over. And each vision ended the same way, with his hands empty. It was during this time of torment that Chancellor Palpatine's voice became the one he sought most. The older man listened without judgment, his concern seeming genuine. "Your visions may be warnings, my boy," Palpatine said one evening as they stood in his dimly lit office. "Warnings of what will come to pass if you do nothing." Anakin's jaw tightened. "I can't just stand by. I won't." Palpatine's eyes gleamed. "And you shouldn't. The Jedi would have you accept fate. I would have you master it." Then came the story. Palpatine spoke of the tragedy of Darth Plagueis, the wise a Sith Lord so powerful he could use the Force to keep the ones he loved from dying. Anakin listened, his heart pounding. It sounded impossible. And yet, was it any stranger than lifting ships with his mind? "Is it possible to learn this power?" he asked. Palpatine's answer was a whisper, "Not from a Jedi." From that moment, the seed was planted. The war, the Council's mistrust, his growing frustration, all of it now bent toward a single purpose. If there was a way to save Padme, he would find it. And if the Jedi would not help him, then he would look elsewhere. His missions became sharper in focus, his strikes swifter, his willingness to bend the rules greater. Every step away from the code seemed justified, because every step was in service to her survival. He began spending more time on Coruscant, between campaigns, often at the Chancellor's side. The Council noticed. Whispers followed him through the temple halls. They asked questions he refused to answer. Padme, sensing the change in him, tried to reach him. In the quiet of their apartment, she would take his hand and speak softly. "Arnie, you're scaring me. I'm just trying to protect you." He would answer, his voice firm. "From what?" she pressed. But he could not tell her, not without revealing the visions that haunted him. And so he pulled further inward, convinced that only he could bear the burden. Each night, the dreams returned. Each morning, he woke more certain that time was running out. The Jedi Code told him to release his fear. The Sith promise told him to master it. And between the two paths, Anakin Skywalker began to lean toward the one that whispered hope, even if it was poisoned. Chapter 6. The temple betrayed. The council chamber was bathed in pale Coruscanti sunlight, its vast windows framing a city that never slept. Yet inside, the air was heavy, charged, as though the temple itself sensed the fracture forming within its walls. Anakin Skywalker stood in the center of the great circle, his hands clasped behind his back, his jaw tight. 12 of the most powerful Jedi in the galaxy sat in silence, their eyes fixed upon him, not with warmth, not with the paternal pride he had once basked in, but with something colder, measuring, calculating. Obi-Wan Kenobi's gaze, usually so steady, could not quite meet his Padawan's eyes. He shifted slightly, the folds of his robe whispering against the polished floor. Mace Windu was the one to speak, his voice clipped, precise. Anakin, the Chancellor, has been in office far longer than our laws allow. His power grows unchecked. We must ensure that his intentions remain loyal to the Republic. Anakin's brow furrowed. I know where this is going. You think he's dangerous? Yoda's ears twitched, his tone carefully neutral. Dangerous, the dark side is. Many paths. It seeks. Clouded, the Chancellor's presence has become. It was not the first time they had spoken of Palpatine in such veiled terms. But this time, their request was plain. Windu's eyes bored into him. We need someone close to him, someone he trusts. That someone is you. For a moment, silence. The words hung in the chamber like a blade suspended by a thread. Anakin's fists clenched at his sides. You want me to spy on him? No one answered immediately. That was answer enough. It was not just a mission. It was a betrayal of a man who had been more than a chancellor to him. Palpatine had been his mentor, his advocate, the one who had seen his worth when the Jedi had doubted him. He's my friend, Anakin said at last, his voice hardening. And you're asking me to go behind his back? That's not the Jedi way. Windu did not flinch. The Jedi way is to protect the Republic, even from those who claim to serve it. Anakin's gaze swept the circle. He saw no trust there, only suspicion of Palpatine, yes, but also of him. They had raised him, trained him, yet even now, they held him at arm's length. Not a master. Not truly one of them. Obi-Wan finally spoke, his voice quieter than the others. Anakin, this isn't easy for any of us, but we need your help. Please. The words were soft, but the damage was already done. They weren't asking him because they trusted him. They were asking because they didn't. He left the chamber without bowing. The temple corridors stretched before him, sunlight spilling through archways in golden pools. He had walked these halls since he was a boy, barefoot and eager, drinking in the wisdom of masters he once revered. Now, the stones felt colder beneath. His boots, the statues of ancient Jedi, once symbols of hope, seemed to watch him with stony judgment. They don't trust me, they never have. In the meditation gardens, wind whispered through the tall grasses, carrying with it the distant hum of repulsor lifts from the city beyond. Anakin stood there, staring at the skyline, replaying the Council's words in his mind. They wanted him to betray Palpatine, but hadn't they already betrayed him? They denied him the rank of master. They kept him from their full confidence. And now they wanted to use him as a tool. A shadow fell across the grass. Obi-Wan had followed him. You're troubled, Obi-Wan said. Anakin didn't turn. They don't trust me, Obi-Wan. They never will. That's not true, isn't it? They'll take my loyalty when it suits them. But when I need theirs, he stopped himself, his jaw tightening. They think I'm dangerous. Obi-Wan's silence was answer enough. Anakin, the war has changed all of us. The Council is under pressure from every side. This request is a test, Anakin cut in. Another hoop to jump through before they let me into their inner circle. If they ever do, his old master sighed, just be careful. This path you're walking, it's narrower than you think. Anakin finally turned, his eyes dark with something Obi-Wan could not quite name. Maybe I'm tired of walking their path. That night, in the Chancellor's private office, the city glowed beyond the durasteel windows, an endless sea of light and shadow. Palpatine sat behind his desk, fingers steepled, the very image of patient authority. You seem troubled, my boy, he said smoothly. Has the Council burdened you with yet another impossible task? Anakin hesitated. Then, as if the dam had cracked, the truth spilled out. They want me to spy on you. Palpatine's brow arched, not in surprise, but in something closer to satisfaction. Do they now? How predictable. Anakin paced before the desk. They don't trust you. They don't trust me. I've given them everything, years of my life, every battle, every victory, and still they treat me like a weapon they can point at their enemies. Perhaps they fear you, Anakin, Palpatine said, his voice low, coaxing. Fear your strength. Fear that you are not bound by their narrow code. The Chancellor's eyes gleamed in the dim light. You are more than a servant of the Council. You are destined for greater things, things they cannot imagine. Anakin felt the anger and hurt twisting inside him, the very emotions the Jedi told him to suppress. Palpatine did not ask him to bury them. Palpatine understood. The next day, as Anakin walked the temple halls, the Jedi moved around him, some nodding in greeting, others avoiding his eyes. It was the same temple, the same ancient stone, yet it no longer felt like home. The last fragile threads of trust between him and the Order had been cut. The temple still stood, but for Anakin Skywalker, it was already beginning to fall. Chapter 7. The Lord of the Sith. The Chancellor's private office was quiet in a way that felt unnatural. The murmurs of the Senate chambers beyond, the rustle of aides moving like insects through corridors of marble and glass. All of it was distant now. Here the air was heavy and still, the dim light falling through tall panes of transparency, painting the floor in fractured shadows. The sky over Coruscant burned with the gold and crimson of a setting sun, and the endless traffic streams shimmered like veins of molten metal. Anakin Skywalker stood before the Chancellor's desk, his fists clenched at his sides. His eyes, restless, defiant, scanned the room without truly seeing it. He felt the pressure in his chest again, the fear that had haunted his nights, whispering in the same voice over and over. She will die, she hummed his light, his anchor, his secret. He had not told the Council of his dreams. Those visions of her gasping for breath in a shadowed chamber, her skin pale, her hands reaching for him as her strength faded. The dreams had the weight of prophecy, the same way he had seen his mother in chains before she died in his arms. It would happen again, unless, Anakin said. Palpatine, no, Sidious, from behind the desk. The voice was silk over steel. You've been searching for a way to defeat death itself. Anakin's gaze snapped to the older man's face. The Chancellor leaned forward, his expression composed, his eyes warm to warm. There is a way. Anakin's pulse thundered in his ears. The Jedi would have told me they do not have such power. Sidious interrupted, his tone carrying the faintest note of contempt. They fear it. They cling to dogma while the galaxy burns. But there are other paths, older, darker, paths that can grant one the power to save those they love. The words lodged in Anakin's mind like hooks. Sidious rose, walking around the desk, his footsteps slow, deliberate. I can teach you what the Jedi refuse to share. Together, we can unlock the deepest mysteries of the Force, the power to preserve life, the power to protect Padman. Anakin froze. He hadn't spoken her name, not aloud. He should have been afraid. He should have recoiled. Instead, he felt the ground shift beneath him. Sidious's presence filled the room, not physically, but in the Force, a shadow stretching over him, vast and suffocating. "The Jedi will come for me," Sidious said softly. "And when they do, you will have to choose, them or her." Anakin's hands shook. He thought of Obi-Wan, his brother, his friend. But in the same breath, he saw Padme's face in the vision again. Saw her lips form his name before the light faded from her eyes. "What must I do?" Sidious smiled. Not the smile of a politician, but of a predator who knows the prey has stepped willingly into the snare. "Pledge yourself to my teachings. Accept the truth that the dark side is the key to power." The Force churned violently around them. Outside, thunder rolled across the city, though the skies were clear. Anakin took a step closer, then another. His voice was a whisper, raw and desperate. I pledge myself to your teachings." Sidious's hand came to rest on his shoulder, heavy with possession. "Good," he breathed, his tone laced with triumph. "From this day forward, you are not Anakin Skywalker, not the servant of a crumbling order. You are Darth Vader." The name settled on Anakin's soul like molten iron poured into a mold. It burned. It solidified in the depths of the Force. Something tore. The bright, turbulent presence that had been the Chosen One dimmed, its light consumed in a vortex of rage and fear. What remained was colder, sharper, a blade forged for one purpose. Anakin felt it too. He did not fight it. The thought of Padme's safety drowned every doubt, every whisper of conscience. Sidious released him and stepped back, his smile widening as he studied his new apprentice. "You will be my fist, Lord Vader. The Jedi are traitors to the Republic. They will try to overthrow me. You will hunt them down, every last one." The words rang like a sentence passed. Somewhere far away, Anakin thought he heard the faint echo of 1,000 voices crying out in warning. He ignored them. "I understand, my master." Outside, night had fallen. The last traces of sunset bled away into the darkness, and the lights of Coruscant glittered like cold stars. In the Chancellor's chambers, the Chosen One was gone. Only the Destroyer remained. Chapter 8. Fire in the House of Light. The night over Coruscant was unusually still. The constant hum of the city's heart, a ceaseless chorus of speeders, voices, and machinery seemed to falter, as if the very air was holding its breath. From the shadows of the Chancellor's private landing pad, a gunship rose into the darkness, its repulsors humming low and predatory. Inside, armored troopers in pristine white sat motionless, their rifles clutched in gloved hands. The blue light of the troop bay flickered across their helmets, erasing any trace of humanity. At their head stood Darth Vader. The name still felt foreign in his mind, but it fit like a gauntlet on his soul, heavy, cold, and unyielding. His Jedi cloak billowed around him as the ship cut through the night toward the temple. His hands were steady, his heart quieter than it had been in years. Only one thought remained: they will come for him. They will take her from him. They will fail to save her. Not this time. The Jedi temple rose ahead, its spires stretching into the clouds, lit from within by warm golden light. The great edifice stood as a monument to 1,000 years of peacekeeping, the beating heart of the Order, a sanctuary of wisdom. Vader saw a target. The gunship descended onto one of the temple's broad landing platforms. The doors slid open with a hiss. Troopers moved out in perfect formation, boots striking the durasteel deck in unison. Behind them, Vader stepped into the open air, his cloak trailing like a shadow that bled across the platform. A young knight, no more than 20, hurried toward them, confusion etched across his face. "General Skywalker, what's going on?" The blue blade ignited. The young knight barely had time to draw his weapon before Vader's strike cut him down. His body crumpled to the ground, the hum of the lightsaber filling the sudden silence. "Execute them all," Vader commanded. Blaster fire erupted. Inside the temple, the first screams rose, high, panicked, disbelieving. The halls that had once echoed with the laughter of younglings and the measured footfalls of Jedi Masters now rang with chaos. Vader moved like a storm given flesh. His blade cleaved through knights, Padawans, even Masters, each strike precise, inevitable. Troopers fanned out at his flanks, their blasters spitting red death into anyone who dared resist in the council chamber. The grand windows shattered under the heat of blaster bolts. Statues of ancient Jedi cracked and fell, their faces breaking. Upon the marble floors, the archives burned shelves of priceless holocrons, shattering under heavy fire. And deeper still, in the heart of the temple, Vader entered the younglings' training hall. They were gathered in the center, no more than a dozen of them, eyes wide and tear-streaked. One boy stepped forward, his voice trembling. "Master Skywalker, there are too many of them. What are we going to do?" For a moment, there was no sound but the quiet hum of the blue blade. No words, no comfort. The doors closed. The Force shuddered beyond the temple walls. Coruscants. Citizens looked up at the glow, first mistaking it for ceremonial lights, then realizing it was fire. Smoke rose from the spires, curling upward like black fingers clawing at the sky. The Holonet would call it an insurrection. The Senate would praise the Chancellor for his swift action against traitors. The people, weary of war, blinded by propaganda, would cheer, and across the galaxy, only 2 souls knew the truth. On the outer rim, Master Yoda felt it, a disturbance like a planet shattering. The Force recoiled, thousands of voices screaming in pain, then falling silent. His small frame bent under the weight of it, and his clawed hands gripped the edge of his seat. Far away on Utapau, Obi-Wan Kenobi staggered as if struck. He knew the signature of that presence in the Force, the power, the heat, the sharp, furious edge. His brother, his friend, Anakin. The temple burned for hours. The firelight spilt down the marble steps like molten gold, reflecting off the Senate's towers in the distance. When it was done, the great doors of the temple stood open to the night. Troopers marched out in orderly lines, their armor scorched and blackened in places. Behind them came Vader, his robes stained with soot and ash, his face unreadable. He did not look back. Somewhere in the darkness of the city, Padme Amidala would be safe. That was all that mattered. The rest of the galaxy could burn. Chapter 9. The Duel of Suns. Mustafar, a blackened world, carved by fire and shaped by the slow violence of molten rivers. The sky was a haze of ash and smoke, the air trembling with heat. Jagged cliffs rose over seas of lava. their edges glowing faintly where the rock was still alive. The Separatist leaders had gathered here for safety, but safety was an illusion. Their fortress, all steel and shadow, clung to the side of a volcanic cliff, its spires gleaming faintly in the smog. Inside, fear lingered like a foul odor in the landing bay. The Separatists' guards stiffened at the sound of approaching engines. A small Republic shuttle descended, its wings folding up like the claws of some predatory bird. The ramp hissed, open, releasing a wave of hot air. Vader emerged. The blue of his lightsaber cast a sharp glow over his face as he walked into the fortress. The Separatists' protests were short-lived. Their voices turned to screams, then to silence. In minutes, the war's political core was dead. Every name that had fueled years of conflict erased in a single stroke. But Vader was not here for politics. He was here to sever the last ties to his old life. When the killing was done, he stepped to a broad window and looked out over the rivers of molten rock. The heat pressed against the transparent steel like a living thing. Somewhere far away, thunder rolled, though here, thunder was the sound of mountains splitting under pressure. That was when he felt it. A familiar presence, strong, steady, the same presence that had once guided his blade, that had fought beside him through sieges and ambushes, through victories and narrow escapes. Obi-Wan Kenobi, the doors opened behind him. Vader turned, and there he was, cloaked in brown, who'd drawn back, eyes heavy with sorrow. Anakin, Obi-Wan said, his voice quiet but firm. That name no longer has any meaning for me, Vader replied, the words sharp and cold. Obi-Wan stepped forward, scanning the carnage. You've done what they said you would never do. You've murdered children, slaughtered the order you swore to protect. His voice cracked. And for what? The promise of a liar. Vader's jaw tightened. I did what I had to do. The Jedi are traitors. They would have taken her from me. They would have let her die. You've allowed this Dark Lord to twist your mind until Obi-Wan stopped himself, swallowing the words. His hand brushed the hilt at his belt, but he did not draw it. Not yet. I will not fight you. Then you will die. The blue blade snapped to life. Obi-Wan's own saber ignited a moment later, its azure glow meeting Vader's in a shower of sparks. The duel began with a single clash, then another, fast, precise, each strike echoing across the steel platforms. They knew each other's movements too well. Every attack met its counter. Every feint was read before it was made. They moved through the control room, slicing through consoles and scattering sparks. The heat of Mustafar poured in through shattered windows, mixing with the heat of the fight. Their breath came faster. On a narrow maintenance bridge above the lava, they locked blades, faces inches apart. Obi-Wan's voice was hoarse. I have failed you, Anakin. You taught me to be strong. Vader snarled, to protect the ones I love. I am doing that now. You are breaking everything you swore to defend. They pushed apart, the bridge shaking beneath them. Blades flashed, blue on blue, light against light, but one of them fought with rage, the other with sorrow. The duel carried them onto a hovering platform drifting over the molten rivers. Heat rippled the air, making their forms waver like ghosts. The sound of the lava was like the roar of an endless crowd. Obi-Wan leapt to the bank of a blackened slope, landing high on the ridge. Vader landed lower, still on the platform as it drifted closer. It's over. Anakin, Obi-Wan called, his voice breaking. I have the high ground. You underestimate my power. Don't try it. Vader leaped in an instant. Obi-Wan's blade swept down. The cut was precise, final. Vader's scream tore through the air as he fell, hitting the ground hard. His legs gone, his left arm gone. His body slid toward the edge, stopping just short of the lava's reach. Flames licked at the air around him. His remaining hand clawed at the ground, dragging himself upward. Obi-Wan stood above, lightsaber still ignited, his face a mask of grief. "You were the chosen one," he said, his voice shaking. "It was said you would destroy the Sith, not join them. Bring balance to the Force, not leave it in darkness. I hate you." Vader spat, his voice raw and jagged. Obi-Wan's gaze faltered. He shut down his blade and turned away, unable to deliver the final stroke. "You were my brother, Anakin. I loved you." The lava roared below as the flames caught Vader's tunic. He screamed again, writhing in agony, his skin searing. The fire climbing his body. Obi-Wan left him there. The shuttle rose into Mustafa's choking skies, leaving behind a broken, burning man whose hate clung to life even as his flesh melted away. And from that hate, Darth Vader would be reborn. Chapter 10. The Mask and the Machine. The sky over Coruscant was heavy with clouds when the shuttle arrived. Inside its dim cargo bay, medical droids moved with mechanical urgency around a charred, broken figure. The smell of scorched flesh lingered in the recycled air, sharp and clinging. Limbs, what remained of them, were twisted in unnatural angles, skin blackened and cracked like burnt stone. His breaths came shallow, each one rattling through. A throat seared nearly shut. He was still alive. Barely the droids worked without pause. Their vocabulator, chatter, clinical, devoid of pity. Tissue degradation at 70%. Cardiovascular output minimal. Patient in systemic shock. Palpatine watched from the edge of the surgical chamber, his hood casting his face in deeper shadow. Only the faint gleam of his eyes betrayed his satisfaction. He had found Vader exactly as he had foreseen, broken, humiliated, teetering between life and death. Perfect, the stretcher slid into a sterile chamber of white light. Droid arms lowered, cutting away the remnants of blackened tunics. A new set of instruments descended, their limbs tipped with scalpels and needles, saws and welders. The work began. Vader's consciousness came and went in flashes. He remembered fire, the heat like a living creature devouring him. He remembered the sound of Obi-Wan's voice, the words like a blade twisted into his heart. "You were my brother." The rest was pain. The droids removed what little remained of his limbs, cauterizing the stumps in showers of sparks. Synthetic replacements were readied, blackened durasteel frames wrapped in artificial muscle, designed for strength, not grace. Over his chest, a polymer plate was grafted, integrating directly with his damaged ribs. Wires and tubes snaked into his body, merging with bone and organ alike. His ruined lungs were replaced with a respirator system. The mechanics, visible for now, until sealed beneath armor, his eyes, once bright and alive, were shrouded beneath tinted optical lenses. They filtered light, enhanced vision, but robbed him of the world's colors. Everything from this moment would be seen through shadow. Palpatine stepped closer as the final piece descended. The mask was shaped to be more than protection. It was a symbol, a visage that would erase the last traces of Anakin Skywalker. Its black surface was smooth, unyielding. The mouthpiece ridged like the fangs of some ancient predator. The droid locked it into place. The seal hissed shut, and for The first time, the chamber filled with the deep mechanical rhythm of Vader's new breath. Slow, steady, eternal. Hesh, ba'a, hesh, ba'a. Palpatine's voice slid through the sound like a serpent in grass. Rise, Lord Vader. The table tilted upward. Vader's armored form emerged from the blinding surgical light, towering, black, against the sterile white. But before obedience came the memory, the fire, the betrayal, Padme. His voice was no longer his own. It was deeper, hollow, wrapped in the echo of his respirator. Is she safe? Is she all right? Palpatine's expression did not change. It seems in your anger, you killed her. The words were a hammer blow. Vader froze. The respirator hissed. The room seemed to tilt. No, his fists clenched. Servos whining under the pressure. I couldn't have. She was alive. I felt her. Palpatine stepped closer, the faintest smile on his lips. It appears, Lord Vader, that your powers are not as strong as you believed. The fury came like a flood, breaking its dam. The restraints shattered under his grip. Equipment smashed against the walls as Vader's armored form surged forward. The droids scattered, their photoreceptors flickering in alarm. A howl tore from him, no longer the sound of a man, but of something born from grief and rage, echoing against the cold walls of the chamber. Palpatine watched it all, unmoved. This rage, this agony, it was the fuel he had wanted. When it was done, Vader stood amid the wreckage, chest heaving in that new, eternal rhythm. His breath would never quicken again, never soften, only the mask's mechanical pulse, over and over. Without rest, the man named Anakin Skywalker was gone. The machine named Darth Vader remained. Chapter 11, The Age of I Am The. Years after the fall of the Republic were written not in ink, but in ash and blood. The Senate still stood, a hollow theater, its chamber filled with obedient voices that repeated the Emperor's will. The laws of the new empire were delivered not by debate, but by decree. Yet it was not Palpatine's voice the galaxy feared most. It was the sound that came before the storm, a slow mechanical breath, and the figure that followed, Darth Vader. From the outer rim to the core, his shadow fell across star systems like a curse. He came without warning, his arrival heralded by the shriek of TIE engines and the looming dagger shape of star destroyers. Blotting out the sun's dot, his purpose was singular. The eradication of the Jedi, the great purge had begun with the fall of the temple, but it did not end there. Some Jedi had escaped the slaughter, scattering like sparks from a dying fire. They hid in backwater worlds, in the deep lanes of smuggler space, in the forgotten ruins of ancient civilizations. Some abandoned the Force entirely, cutting themselves off in hopes of vanishing from its sight. But Vader found them. On the volcanic world of Char, he cut down Master Vintra amid the ash storms, his red blade burning through the blackened air. In the frozen wastes of Thryn, he cornered the healer Larusuan. Her lightsaber blew against the endless white, until it was extinguished. Those who fought died. Those who begged died slower. The Emperor unleashed Vader like a weapon without restraint, and Vader obeyed. Each hunt, each kill, fed the furnace inside him, but it never burned away the cold at his core. He no longer fought for Padme. She was gone, her name never spoken. He no longer fought for the Republic. It was dead, buried beneath the weight of imperial banners. He fought because the Emperor commanded it, because the darkness demanded it. The armor became his prison and his power. Every movement was accompanied by the hiss and rumble of his respirator. the whine of servos in his limbs. His flesh no longer healed. His body was sustained by machinery and will alone. Pain was constant, a reminder, Palpatine once said, of what betrayal costs. Entire worlds learned to fear the sight of the black figure descending from a shuttle ramp, cape trailing, lightsaber hilt hanging at his belt like a promise. He did not conquer for territory. Planets were not subjugated for their resources. His wrath fell without strategy. A settlement, a station, an entire moon erased not for gain, but for the act itself. In the mining colonies of Kessel, he ordered the execution of all prisoners, their crimes irrelevant. On the desert world of Rella, he oversaw the burning of an entire city because a farmer had given water to a fugitive. Jedi the galaxy began to speak of him in whispers. Parents invoked his name to frighten their children into obedience. Soldiers of the rebellion, still in its infancy, spoke of him as a force of nature. Not a man, but there were those who dared to resist. Small cells of insurgents sprang up, striking at supply lines, sabotaging imperial outposts. Most were destroyed within weeks, but some survived, vanishing before Vader's arrival, leaving only their symbols painted in red on walls the stormtroopers could not erase. The Emperor allowed these embers to remain a fire that would draw his prey into the open. Vader hunted them as he hunted Jedi, his presence in the Force like the pull of a black hole, and in the midst of this age of iron and shadow, a rumor began to spread. A boy had been seen on distant worlds, sandy-haired, barely grown, but quick with a blaster, and faster still in a cockpit. His name, the whispers said, was Luke Skywalker. Vader did not yet know the truth. The name stirred nothing in him, not yet, but the Force. The Force had begun to move again. The Emperor felt it too, from the throne room of his obsidian tower. Palpatine watched his apprentice kneel before him, the black mask tilted in obedience. The Jedi are nearly extinct, my master, Vader said, his voice as hollow and cold as the armor that enclosed him. Nearly, Palpatine replied, a flicker of satisfaction in his tone. But not completely, and those who remain will seek to train another. The Emperor's gaze turned toward the unseen horizon. There is a tremor in the Force, a new threat. Find it, destroy it, and so the hunt would begin again. Chapter 12. The Seeds of Rebellion. The shadows of the Empire's reign. Life still clung stubbornly to the galaxy. Markets bustled on distant moons. Ships darted between worlds. Smugglers whispered in cantinas. But beneath it all was the weight of fear, the kind that pressed into every conversation, that made eyes drop at the sight of stormtrooper armor, that silenced entire towns when a black-cloaked figure walked among them. And yet, even in the deepest darkness, seeds can take root. It began with whispers, names spoken quietly in safe houses and hidden cellars. Gerrera, Mothma, Organa, scattered. Leaders, each resisting in their own way, each slowly, carefully weaving threads together. Cargo crates bound for Imperial supply depots would vanish. Holonet transmissions would flicker with brief, encrypted messages. Hope lives. Most of these embers of rebellion burned out quickly under the boot of the Empire, but some survived. And among those who survived, a name began to pass between lips, like a secret worth dying for, Luke Skywalker. On the desert world of Tatooine, he was just a farm boy, blonde-haired, restless, too quick to look to the horizon instead of the ground beneath his feet. The suns baked the dust into his skin. The wind sharpened his eyes. He worked the vaporators in the twin dawns and drove his speeder across the dunes. In the twilight, dreaming of ships that could carry him beyond the edge of the maps. He didn't know his name carried the weight of a prophecy to the rebels who heard it. Skywalker was a spark, a name connected to another time, when Jedi walked openly and the galaxy had not yet bowed to the shadow. A name that might mean the Force itself had not abandoned them. Vader did not yet know the boy existed, but the Force did far away. In the swamps of a forgotten world, Yoda felt it, a thread in the great current, bright and untamed. He had long ago buried his hope beneath years of exile, but now it stirred again. On the fringes of the galaxy, Obi-Wan Kenobi kept his silent vigil, watching from the shadows as the boy grew. He never spoke his true name aloud. Not yet. The Emperor, too, felt the shift. Sitting in the obsidian throne room aboard his flagship, he looked out at the swirl of stars and saw possibility and danger. There is a tremor in the Force, he told Vader. Vader stood motionless before the throne, the rhythm of his breath filling the silence between words. I have felt it, my master. The son of Skywalker lives. The words struck like a blade through the air. Vader did not speak for a moment. Somewhere deep within the armor, something stirred, not yet recognition, but an echo. If he could be turned, Palpatine said, his voice slow and deliberate, he would become a powerful ally. Vader bowed his head, hiding whatever thoughts might flicker behind the lenses of his mask. He will join us or die. Beyond their words, the galaxy shifted again. Rebel cells began to unite, their stolen starfighters, now part of coordinated strikes instead of scattered raids. Convoys vanished into hyperspace before Imperial cruisers could intercept them. Recruitment doubled in hidden camps across the Outer Rim. But rebellion was never safe work. On Corellia, an entire network was executed in the street as a warning. On Lothal, stormtroopers burned villages suspected of harboring rebels. And still, the seeds spread, carried by smugglers, hidden in shipping crates, passed encoded messages through the holonet. For every leader captured, another stepped forward. For every victory the Empire claimed, the rebels found a way to turn the loss into a rallying cry. On the edge of the galaxy, Luke Skywalker prepared to leave the only world he had ever known. His journey had not yet begun, but already the stars were moving for him. Already the Force was weaving him into the war he did not yet see. In the black corridors of the Executor, Vader stood before a viewport, watching the endless field of stars. His reflection stared back at him, black mask, cold lenses, breath forever bound to the sound of the machine. Somewhere out there, a boy carried his blood. Somewhere, the Force had given rise to a new thread in the tapestry. When they met, the galaxy itself would tremble. For now, the seeds of rebellion grew in silence. Deep in the cracks of the Empire's armor, they would not stay hidden for long. Chapter 13. The Son of the Suns, the galaxy, had known many names for its heroes, liberators, saviors, champions of the people, but few titles carried the weight and mystery of the Son of the Suns. It was a phrase whispered in ancient Jedi prophecy, spoken in temple shadows long before the fall of the Republic. It spoke of a figure, born of light yet forged in the crucible of darkness, one who would shape the destiny of the Force itself. Luke Skywalker never sought that mantle, and yet, by the tides of war and fate, it had begun to settle upon his shoulders. His rise had not been a sudden explosion, but a steady, unyielding climb against impossible odds. On Tatooine, he had been a farm boy staring at twin sunsets, longing for a life beyond moisture, vaporators, and sand. Now, across countless star systems, his name traveled ahead of him like a herald of change. To the oppressed, he was a glimmer of hope. To the Empire, a thorn buried deep in the flesh of its might. But to two figures at the very heart of that Empire, Luke's ascendance meant far more and far less than mere rebellion. To Emperor Palpatine, Darth Sidious, the boy was a seed of catastrophe. Not because of his skill with a lightsaber or his growing influence among the rebels, but because of the one truth the Sith Lord had learned across decades of manipulation. The greatest threats were born not of armies, but of hearts. Luke carried within him a stubborn compassion, the same dangerous quality that had once undone the Jedi Order. Sidious had seen it before in another, in Anakin Skywalker, and had twisted it to his will. But here it was again, reincarnated in the sun, yet burning hotter, harder to corrupt. The boy was dangerous because he was not driven by greed or ambition. He was driven by love. And for Darth Vader, Luke was something more dangerous still. Not an enemy to be destroyed, nor a rival to be outwitted, but a mirror. A living reflection of the boy he himself had been, before the war, before the betrayal, before the fire. Every time Vader crossed sabers with Luke, he felt the clash reverberate not just through steel, but through memory. There was anger, yes, but beneath it an ache, a raw recognition that Luke's path might have been his own, had he made different choices on that fateful day. Above the lava flows of Mustafar, their encounters had left marks neither of them could see. Luke carried the weight of knowing the monster before him was also his father. Vader carried the quiet, corrosive awareness that every strike he delivered to the boy's blade was also a strike against the last spark of Anakin Skywalker within him. And somewhere in the tangled web of prophecy and power, Sidious watched, weaving his trap. Across the galaxy, the rebellion braced for what was coming. Star destroyers prowled like steel sharks across hyperspace lanes, hunting cells of resistance. Whole worlds were choked into submission. Yet rumors persisted of a young Jedi who had returned from the brink at Bespin, who had walked away from the Dark Lord of the Sith, not as prey, but as an equal. Some called it myth-making, others called it madness. But in cantinas on Star, freighters, in the whispered corners of slave markets, the words kept spreading. The Son of the Suns has come. Luke himself felt the weight of those whispers like a cloak he had not asked to wear. He knew the stories the Jedi once told of the Chosen One, of balance to the Force, and he feared the way they seemed to cling to his name now. In quiet moments aboard the rebel fleet, he would find himself staring at the stars, wondering if destiny was a chain or a compass. He wanted to believe in choice, in the power of the will, but he had seen the shadow in his father's eyes. He knew how quickly the will could be bent. For Vader, these same nights were filled with a different kind of reflection. He stood upon the observation decks of star destroyers, hands clasped behind his back, watching the void. He thought of the boy's face when Luke had refused to join him. He thought of the way Luke's saber had burned with that same sky-blue light Obi-Wan once wielded, and for the first time in many years, Vader found himself caught in an unfamiliar current, uncertainty. Was the boy to be destroyed, or claimed? And if claimed, to what end, the Emperor's or his own? Sidious needed no such uncertainty. In the shadowed throne room of Coruscant, his plans stretched outward like a spider's web. He would lure the boy into his grasp, dangle the promise of power before him, and twist that dangerous compassion into something venomous. The Emperor's mind had always been a storm of contingency, but for Luke Skywalker he had prepared. something more delicate than a trap. He had prepared an inheritance. If the son could be turned, the father would be cast aside like a rusted blade. If the son resisted, well, the galaxy had no shortage of corpses. The stage was being set. The Death Star, the second of its kind, greater and more terrible than the first, loomed in its skeletal construction. The rebels planned their desperate assault. The Emperor summoned his servants, and somewhere between them, Luke Skywalker walked a path lit by two suns, the fading light of his father's memory, and the blinding blaze of a future yet unwritten. The galaxy did not yet know it, but the pieces had been placed. The next moves would not be fought in fleets or armies, but in the hearts of three men bound by blood, by power, and by the long shadow of destiny. The Son of the Suns had risen, and with him the final act had begun. Chapter 14. The Temptation. Of the father, the hunt for Luke Skywalker was not driven by hatred. Not entirely. For Darth Vader, the boy was not a loose thread to be cut, nor a rebellion to be crushed. He was an opportunity. An opportunity to reshape the galaxy, to topple the withered shadow of Darth Sidious, and to rebuild the Sith in a new image. Not master and apprentice, not ruler and subject, but father and son, bound by blood and power, ruling as equals over. A galaxy forged anew. It had been Sidious who first planted the seed of turning. Luke, the Emperor, had seen the boy's defiance at Bespin, not as a failure, but as a spark that could be stoked into ambition. Vader had simply taken the idea for himself. Yet where Sidious would twist Luke into a weapon, Vader imagined something different, something that almost felt like redemption, though he would never dare name it so. In Luke, he saw strength uncorrupted by cruelty, resolve unbroken by compromise. He saw the leader he might have been, had the galaxy's path been different. Still, temptation was a fragile craft. Luke was not blind to the darkness in him, nor to the horrors the Empire had wrought. Vader understood this, so he approached, not with overt seduction, but with truth, or at least the truth as he had come to believe it. The Jedi betrayed me. The Republic was a rotting corpse before the Clone Wars even began. The only true peace comes through strength. These were not lies, not to him. He told himself that by showing Luke this truth, he was offering the boy freedom from the naivety that had doomed the Jedi Order. He would not beg Luke to join him. He would convince him. Their next meeting came not by chance, but by design. The Empire had its spies, and the rebellion could not hide all its movements. When Luke's presence was detected on a remote supply moon, Vader went alone, dismissing the usual retinue of stormtroopers. He did not need them, and more importantly, he did not want them to see what would pass between him and his son. The meeting place was a shattered temple, its spires broken like teeth, its stones worn smooth by centuries of wind. Luke stood in the courtyard, lightsaber unlit at his side. The Force thrummed between them, heavy with unspoken words. "Father," Luke began, and the word was both accusation and plea. Vader's voice was deep, resonant through the mask. "You have grown stronger, stronger, but not like you, not." Yet, Vader allowed. He took a step closer, his shadow swallowing Luke's own. "You still fight for a dying cause. The rebellion will fall. The Emperor will crush it, as he has crushed all who stood before him. And you," Luke asked. "You serve him." Vader's silence was not an admission, but neither was it a denial. "I serve the galaxy. The Emperor's reign is only a means to an end." His tone shifted, almost coaxing. "With you at my side, that end could come sooner. Luke's eyes narrowed. You want me to join you? I want you to survive, Vader said simply. And more than that, to rule. Together, we could overthrow the Emperor, end his tyranny, create an order not bound by the hypocrisy of the Jedi or the chaos of the Senate. The offer hung in the air like a blade. Luke could almost feel its weight. There was no deception in Vader's voice, no cackling malice, only conviction. And that, somehow, was more dangerous than any threat. You think I'd stand by while you enslave worlds? Luke's voice trembled, not from fear, but from the strain of speaking to the man who was both his greatest enemy and the only family he had left. Vader's reply was slow, deliberate. You mistake control for enslavement. A galaxy without order is a galaxy in chains to chaos. I learned that lesson long ago. Luke shook his head. That lesson cost you everything. For the briefest heartbeat, Vader said nothing. The mask hid his face, but not the flicker in the Force. A ripple of old pain, of memory. Podmeth's voice, faint as an echo. The cries on Mustafar, the bitter heat of betrayal. But it was gone as quickly as it came. Perhaps, Vader admitted. But with you, I could reclaim it. And here was the true temptation. Not power, not conquest, but the promise of restoration. Vader imagined the two of them standing before the galaxy. No Emperor above them, no chains around them. He imagined a galaxy where his name was no longer whispered in fear, but spoken in respect. A galaxy where his son did not look at him as an enemy, but Luke saw the same vision twisted. A galaxy where fear had simply changed hands. Where his father's armor cast an even longer shadow. He saw his own face behind the mask. Come with me, Vader said, his voice softer now, almost human beneath the synth. I can teach you the ways of the Force the Jedi kept hidden. Together no, Luke said, and the words struck harder than a lightsaber. If I join you, I'll become you, and I can't. For a moment, the wind moved through the temple ruins, carrying only the dry rasp of stone on stone. Then Vader turned away, his cape swirling like a night tide. You will change your mind, he said, not as a threat, but as a certainty, or the galaxy will change it for you. Luke watched him go, his heart heavy with something he could not yet name. It was not victory nor relief. It was the weight of knowing that behind the mask there was a man who still believed in his own way that he was fighting for something good. And that, perhaps, was the most dangerous darkness of all. Chapter 15, The Throne of Shadows, The Throne of Shadows. Death Star hung like a phantom in the black, a half-completed skeleton of steel and terror. Its construction was not hidden. The Emperor wanted the galaxy to see it. A promise, a threat, a warning that even in its unfinished state, it was a weapon capable of breaking entire star systems, and within its cold corridors, far from the battle raging beyond its shields, a different kind of war was about to be fought, not with fleets, but with the Force itself. Luke Skywalker was brought before the Emperor's throne in silence. No stormtroopers flanked him now. He was past the point of physical restraint. Sidious preferred invisible chains, the kind made from fear, doubt, and desire. The throne room was vast and dim, its vaulted ceiling lost in shadow, its grate windows framing the pale light of Endor below. In the center of it all, upon a platform that seemed almost to float, sat the Emperor himself, hunched yet regal, his eyes burning like twin suns in decay. Vader stood beside the throne, a black sentinel. His presence was not passive. Every breath through his respirator was a reminder to Luke that the father he sought was locked behind armor, servitude, and years of darkness. Yet Luke felt something more beneath the surface. A current, a hesitation. Sidious's voice slithered through the silence. "Welcome, young Skywalker." Luke held his ground, refusing to bow. "You'll never turn me." Oh, Sidio's smile was a wound opening. "I'm afraid the defiance of youth is no match for the truths you will learn here." He rose from his throne with unsettling ease, moving toward the boy with the glide of a predator. "You have been taught to hate the Sith, to fear the power of the dark side. But your father did not fear it, and neither will you." Luke's gaze flicked to Vader, searching for a flicker of humanity. "My father was destroyed by you." Sidious chuckled, a dry, hollow sound. "Destroyed? No, my young Jedi, he was saved. Freed from the lies of the Jedi Council, from the chains of weakness. And you could be greater still." Vader's deep voice cut through. "The Emperor has foreseen it. Together, you and I could end this destructive conflict and bring order to the galaxy." It was the same promise Luke had heard before, but here, in this shadowed hall, it carried a different weight. This was no private offer whispered in ruins. This was temptation presented as destiny, with the galaxy itself as the prize. Luke shook his head. "I will never serve the dark side." Sidio's smile only widened, as though Luke's resistance was part of the game. "Perhaps, but you will serve me nonetheless. For even now, your friends die in the skies above. Their fleet falls to my traps, and every moment you resist me, thousands perish." He leaned closer, his breath like frost. "Strike me down, and their suffering will end." The offer was venom, sweetened by the truth Luke could sense in it. The battle outside was going badly. He could feel the fear and desperation of the rebel pilots like a storm on the edge of his mind. But striking down the Emperor, that was the path Vader had taken once, and it had led to ruin. Sidious turned his back, walking slowly toward the great windows. "I can feel your anger, boy. It gives you focus, makes you stronger. Do not fight it." Luke's hand twitched toward his lightsaber, and the Emperor smiled without looking. "Yes, take your weapon, use it. I am unarmed. Strike me down with all of your hatred, and you will take your place at my side." Vader's voice came, low and commanding. "Luke," there was warning in it, but also something almost pleading. Luke's heart pounded. His fingers brushed the hilt of his weapon, but he did not ignite it. Instead, he stepped back. "No, I am a Jedi, like my father before me." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Vader's breath caught almost imperceptibly. Sid's smile collapsed into a snarl. "So be it." Jedi lightning erupted from the Emperor's hands. Brilliant arcs of blue-white that tore through the air and slammed into Luke. The pain was unlike anything he had ever felt, a searing that reached past flesh and into the very core of his being. He crumpled to his knees, teeth clenched against him. A screamed-up Vader stood motionless, his head turning slightly between the Emperor and his son. In the Force, the conflict was a storm. Loyalty clashing against something older, deeper, more human. Sidious laughter rose with the crackle of his power. "Your feeble skills are no match for the dark side," the Emperor hissed. "You will pay the price for your lack of vision." Luke's voice broke as he cried out, "Father, please." The single word cut through the darkness like a blade. Vader's hands curled into fists. The Emperor did not see the change at first. The subtle shift in the black figure beside him. Sidious poured more power into the attack, lightning arcing wildly across the floor. Luke writhed, vision blurring, the great windows above him swimming in light. And Vader remembered the heat of Mustafar Podmes's lifeless eyes, the bitter taste of regret. The boy before him was not a Jedi, not a rebel. He was a son, his son. The Emperor was too consumed by his own triumph to see the decision crystallize. But the galaxy would feel it soon enough. Chapter 16. The Fall of the Emperor. The throne room was a crucible of light and shadow. Luke lay writhing beneath the torrent of Sidious Force lightning, his body arching as the current scorched him from the inside out. The smell of ozone filled the air. His screams reverberated through the vast chamber, echoing against cold durasteel walls. The Emperor's laughter slithered between them, the glee of a predator savoring the kill. Vader stood still, a dark pillar beside the throne. His mechanical breath was steady, but within the mask, the man who had once been Anakin Skywalker was anything but calm. The boy's voice, "Father, please," had pierced through layers of armor, obedience, and years of servitude. It had struck something ancient, something that predated the fall, the mask, even the name Vader. Sidious did not stop. He poured his hatred into each strike, reveling in Luke's suffering. The blue lightning reflected off his sunken face, making him look less like a man and more like some ancient demon of the deep. "Now, young Skywalker," Sidious hissed, "you will die." Luke's vision was collapsing into flashes, arcs of blue, the looming shadow of Vader, the pale gleam of the Emperor's teeth. Pain swallowed thought. His fingers twitched against the floor, searching for his lightsaber, but it lay far beyond. "Reach, Father." The word was barely a breath now, but the Force carried it, not as a plea for rescue, but as an anchor. And Vader felt it, not as the Dark Lord, not as Sidious enforcer, but as a father. In that moment, the years fell away. He saw a boy not dressed in black, but in desert garb, racing across the sands of Tatooine with a grin that spoke of freedom. He saw a young man standing before the Jedi Council, defiant yet eager to prove himself. He saw Pan, her eyes alight with hope, telling him she was pregnant. He heard her voice again, soft and certain. "There is good in him. I know there is." The Emperor's lightning roared, snapping Vader back to the present. Luke's body convulsed, his cries growing weaker. Sidious was killing him, and Vader was letting it happen. Something broke, not in armor or circuits, but in the iron chain that had bound him to his master for decades. Vader moved. Sidious was still focused on his prey, so consumed by his triumph that he did not notice the black figure closing in. Vader's gloved hands seized the Emperor with a force that made the old man's eyes flare in shock. "You," Sidious began, but the word dissolved into a scream as Vader lifted him effortlessly from the floor. Lightning erupted wildly from the Emperor's hands, striking Vader full in the chest. Circuits screamed, armor sizzled, and the stench of burning electronics filled the air. But Vader did not falter. The pain was unimaginable, searing through flesh and machine alike. Yet it only drove him forward. Luke, barely conscious, saw the scene through a haze, his father holding the Emperor high above him, the arcs of lightning cascading over them both like a storm dot, with a roar that was more human than mechanical. Vader turned and hurled Sidious into the deep reactor shaft that yawned in the center of the chamber. The Emperor's scream trailed into the abyss, swallowed by the endless fall. His lightning flickered and vanished, leaving only the hum of the station's distant machinery. Silence fell. The stench of scorched metal and flesh clung to the air. Vader staggered, his breath ragged, the internal systems of his suit sparking and failing. His knees threatened to buckle, but he forced himself toward his son. Luke pushed himself upright, still shaking, his gaze locked on the towering figure. Before him, Father, you saved me. Vader sank to one knee, his strength failing faster now. I couldn't let you die, he said, each word dragging through static and pain. Luke reached for him, but Vader raised a trembling hand. It is too late for me, son. Luke shook his head fiercely. No, I'll get you out of here. Vader's mechanical breath stuttered. You already have. Behind them, the throne room seemed emptier, smaller, without Sidious's presence. The darkness had less weight, yet it lingered in the shadows, as if reluctant to admit defeat. Luke could feel it, the echo of the Emperor's hatred, like a whisper fading into the void. The Death Star shuddered as explosions rippled through its structure. The battle outside had reached its climax. The rebels were breaking through. Time was running out. Luke wrapped his arm under Vader's, helping him to his feet. The black armor was heavier than he expected, not just in mass, but in history. Each step toward the hangar was a step away from the shadow of Sidious, and toward something neither of them had foreseen. Anakin Skywalker had returned, but only for a little while. Chapter 17, The Last Breath. The hangar bay of the Death Star was a chaos of alarms, firelight, and the distant thrum of the station tearing itself apart. Outside, the battle raged, a cacophony of turbolyzers and starfighter engines. But here, all sounds seemed muted beneath the slow, uneven rhythm of Vader's breathing. Luke, half carried, half supported his father toward the shuttle waiting. At the edge of the deck, the armor was heavier with each step, the weight of it pulling both of them down. Sparks rained from the ceiling. In the distance, a deep groan rippled through the station's frame, like the death rattle of a giant. Just a little further, Luke said, his voice strained but steady. Vader stumbled, knees nearly buckling. The servos in his legs whined in protest. Luke, go, he rasped. You must save yourself. Luke shook his head sharply. I'm not leaving you here. They reached the ramp of the shuttle, but Vader stopped, his gloved hand closing around Luke's arm with surprising strength. It is too late. For me, he said, his voice a mixture of mechanical distortion and something deeper, something human. My place is here. No, Luke insisted, his heart pounding. I can save you. Vader's head tilted slightly, as if considering the words. For so long, saving had meant power, control, victory. But Luke meant something else entirely, something Anakin Skywalker had not felt in decades. He straightened, using what little strength remained, and his next words were quiet, almost hesitant. Help me, take this mask off. Luke blinked, startled. But, you'll die. The reply came without pause. Nothing can stop that now. His voice softened, the distortion in it crackling with the failing systems of his suit. Just, for once, let me look on you with my own eyes. Luke swallowed hard. The hangar seemed to fall silent around them. Slowly, gently, he reached for the locking mechanism at the side of the helmet. With a hiss, the seals broke. The mask came away in two parts. First, the domed helmet, then the front plate with its dark, soulless lenses. Beneath was not the monster the galaxy feared, but a man, pale, scarred, the years of war and pain etched into every line of his face. His eyes, though tired and dim, were the eyes of a father looking at his son. Luke's breath caught. "Father." Anakin Skywalker's lips curved in the faintest smile. "Now you see me." For the first time since Mustafar, he saw, not through filters or sensors, but with his own eyes. The light of the hangar bathed Luke's face, and in that face he saw Padme's gentleness, his own stubbornness, and something more, hope. "You were right." Anakin's voice was faint, each word an effort. "You were right about me. Tell your sister. You were right." Luke's throat tightened. He nodded, unable to speak. The station shuddered again, the tremors more violent now. Fires roared across the hangar floor. The end was coming fast, but in that small space between breaths, there was no war, no empire, no dark side. There was only a father and son meeting truly for the first and last time. Anakin's gaze never left Luke's. "You already have saved me." His voice faltered, the last remnants of mechanical breath rattling in his chest. "You were my light." And then, with one long, slow exhale, the sound of the respirators ceased. The body in Luke's arms grew still. Luke knelt there for a moment, his head bowed. His father's weight was heavy, but not as heavy as the knowledge that they had found each other only at the end. Tears blurred his vision, but he forced himself to move. He could not leave Anakin Skywalker here, in the heart of the weapon he had helped to build. With quiet strength, Luke lifted his father's body and carried it into the shuttle. He laid him down gently, arranging the hands over the chest plate. The face remained uncovered. The man would be buried as himself, not as Darth Vader. As the shuttle's engines roared to life, Luke took one last look at the burning hangar. The Death Star groaned under the strain of its own destruction. Somewhere, deep inside, he thought he could still hear echoes, not of Sidious's laughter, but of his father's final breath. The ramp closed, sealing them off from the collapsing fortress. The shuttle rose, slipping free of the bay and into the void. Behind them, the Death Star's shadow loomed one final time before it blossomed into light. A supernova of fire and debris that marked both the end of a reign and the quiet redemption of a man who had once been lost. Chapter 18. The fulfillment and the silence, the death. Star's fiery end lit the stars over Endor like a second sun. For a heartbeat, the galaxy seemed to hold its breath, and then the cheering began. Across the forest moon's surface, in the skies above, and in hidden rebel outposts scattered across 1,000 systems, the news spread. The Emperor is dead. The second Death Star is destroyed. The war, for all intents and purposes, was over. But in the shuttle, gliding away from the wreckage, Luke Skywalker did not cheer. His gaze was fixed on the still figure beside him, the man who had once been Darth Vader, the man who had once been Anakin Skywalker. The silence between them was not the absence of sound, but the presence of something vast and final. The prophecy of the Chosen One had been told and retold through centuries. A being born of the Force itself, destined to bring balance. The Jedi had debated its meaning endlessly, each Order Master convinced they understood its true shape. Some believed it spoke of a great warrior who would destroy the Sith in battle. Others thought it meant the restoration of the Jedi Order. None had foreseen this, that balance would come not in triumph, but in sacrifice. Luke understood now. His father had destroyed the Emperor, ending the line of the Sith, but it had cost him his life. The balance was restored, yet it did not feel like victory. It felt like loss. The shuttle descended toward the forests of Endor, the celebration below already beginning. Fires were being lit, drums beaten, voices raised in song. Ewoks danced with rebel pilots. The air was alive with joy and relief. But Luke landed away from the center of the camp, at the edge of a quiet clearing. There, beneath towering trees, he prepared the funeral pyre. He laid Anakin's body carefully upon the wood, the armor still heavy upon him. He had removed the helmet entirely, leaving his father's face bare to the night air. The stars above were sharp and countless, like the eyes of the Force watching this final moment. Luke stood for a long time before lighting the pyre. His mind was a tangle of memory. The first time he heard the name Vader, the duel on Cloud City, the moment. The truth had broken over him like a storm. And then, the last breath, the quiet words, "You already have saved me," when the fire caught. It rose quickly, the flames licking upward, orange and gold against the dark. The heat pushed against Luke's face, but he did not step back. This was not only a farewell, it was an offering, a gift to the man his father had once been, and a final release for the monster he had become. He felt the Force around him, vast and solemn. There was no voice, no vision, only a deep sense of stillness, balance. The darkness and the light in perfect, fragile harmony. Back at the village, the celebration roared on. Han and Leia embraced. Chewbacca roared his laughter. The Ewoks sang, in high, cheerful voices. But Luke stayed at the pyre until the flames began to collapse, the embers settling into the quiet earth. When he returned to the village, the night was deep, the stars clear. Leia stood apart from the others, watching the forest with a thoughtful expression. Luke approached her, and for a moment they simply stood together in the quiet. "I saw him," Luke said softly, "our father, before he died." Leia turned. To him, her eyes steady. "I know, somehow, I've always known. He came back." Luke's voice was rough, but there was peace in it. Not as Vader, as Anakin he was. He was good again. Leia nodded, though her gaze was distant. The truth carried both warmth and sorrow, the kind of truth that reshaped a person, quietly and forever. Later, when the fires in the village burned low and the songs faded, Luke wandered to the edge of the forest. The moonlight dappled the ground, silvering the leaves. He felt it before he saw it. The presence, warm and luminous, like the sunrise after a long night. And there they were, 3 figures, faint but clear in the Force. Obi-Wan Kenobi, smiling gently. Master Yoda, his eyes full of quiet pride. And beside them, tall and steady, was Anakin Skywalker, not the scarred man from the shuttle, but the man he had once been, whole and unbroken, the light of youth in his face. Luke's breath caught. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. And then Anakin smiled, a smile without regret, without darkness, a father's smile. The vision faded slowly, like the last glow of a fire, leaving Luke alone in the moonlit forest. Alone. And not alone. The Force was with him. The prophecy was fulfilled. The Sith were no more. The galaxy would heal. And yet, somewhere in the vastness of the dark, the shadows stirred. The balance had been restored, but balance was not stillness. Light and dark would always circle one another, as they had since. The beginning, the holocron of history would close here, the tale complete, and in the echoing silence that followed, the darkness whispered still,